to tag people on social media, and the calendar was another. I felt like my own secretary. It was exciting.
Well, there you go.
Oh, yeah. Keeping people, you know, keeping yourself busy. So
it saves time on your follow-up, you know, if you can. It's the geeky part. I can do part of it at the event, so I go for that. And me saying that I needed to check in, Jonathan, you inspired me to check in from the parking lot, so I didn't get in trouble.
That's right.
But I didn't hit it. I hit the check-in, and then I came in to tag people. Yeah. I felt like you. I was taking pictures and everything. I mean,
no, hey. I sent pictures to Crystal. I think I might have overwhelmed her. It's just a lot going on. So anyway, I guess I'll get started on. And if you guys have any specific questions, obviously, just shoot them at me. You know, as long as they're somewhat related to what I'm talking about, we can go over them there. I just wanted to kind of go through the reason why it's important for all of us to really revisit our brand on a regular basis. Because guess what? Things change. And when things change, your brand has the potential to get out of alignment. And when your brand's out of alignment, you're not necessarily firing on all cylinders, as they would say. You're putting a lot of effort into things that may not be working. So that is why I wanted to have this webinar at this time of the year. And here is the 9 components of brand. Where did that go? Oh man, okay. So these are the 9 components of brand. And one thing that I wanted to, yes, that. Thank you, Rich. Now, have you actually done your 9 components of brand?
I've got it filled out. Not all the way, but I got a lot of it filled out.
All right. Because, you know, it's almost a year, and you're going to have to revisit it again.
I know.
Because things change.
But I only did it a few months ago, so it's okay.
So the 9 components of brand are you, your competition, your differentiators, your audience, your brand personality, how you handle a crisis, your vision, which is your long-term, your story, which is really what everything is about, and general authenticity, making sure that you are being true to yourself, your story, and what you're saying is valid and true to you. So those are the 9 components of brand. So if you're establishing your brand, you're going to use these 9 components to really explore and establish your brand. You'd utilize the workbook to kind of look at the important aspects, where you fit in the marketplace, your differentiators, how to explore your authentic story, and so on and so forth. That workbook has a lot of great exercises in it that kind of go over the basic level. Branding. Now, I think I've sent you that. When we were working with Manoj, we went over some of it, right?
Yes, and I probably have it somewhere, just not in front of me. So I apologize if I ask questions on stuff that you have that's in your exercises.
That's all right. It really is just kind of a basic level look at your brand and what your brand represents and how you represent it. So it's also a great tool for you to use when you're doing your brand review. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you're establishing your brand, you can use it to establish your brand. And then if you're doing your brand review, you're going to print a clean copy, not look at the old one, and actually go and answer the questions again while you're doing the brand review. Take a look at how the questions, you know, are alike, how your answers are alike and different, and why those shifts may have happened. So the difference between a brand that's aligned properly and one that is not is tremendous. Aligned brands are working toward their unified goal, and unaligned brands are just disjointed, inconsistent, and to the outside appear to be flailing. And I think we all can say we've seen some of these brands as they fall apart. You know, they're grasping at straws, they're trying everything, and some are successful at, you know, recovering, and then others are not. Yeah, I don't remember where I was going with that. So let's first explore how a brand can become online. The one thing that I wanted to say is, you know, we're looking at your brand. I know where I was going with it. Your brand and your business are 2 separate things in this situation. Your brand is how you're perceived by the audience at large, what they see you as, because that's what brand is. And your business is what you're actually doing. So when we're talking about things that are unaligned, it's your brand, what you're saying you are, and then your business, what you actually are. So making sure, and what you're perceived as by the larger audience. So if that and what you actually are doing are not lining up, that's where you can run into some problems. So let's look at how brands, how did this happen? All of these things can change over time. All the 9 components. I know what I did. Anyway, some are more likely to change than others. Obviously, your values, you are going to change as you grow, but your values may not change. Your why may not change, but your story can change because you're actually you're writing your story as you continue with your brand. So updating your story actually keeps you authentic and true to who you really are. And being aware of that and going in and saying, hey, I'm changing. Or, hey, my competitors have changed. Or, hey, these differentiators aren't really differentiators anymore because everybody's doing it and I'm doing it. So I've got to come up with new differentiators. You've got to grow with the market. You've got to make sure that your brand is reflective of who you actually are and what you're offering the market. So if things change and you don't account for those shifts, then you're out of alignment. So some issues from a brand and business being out of alignment: loss of brand identity, an inability to connect with your audience, and no customer loyalty. Those brands that have customers that just kind of bounce around, it's because they may not be in alignment. They may not be saying the same thing as what they're doing. They don't believe in your claims. Customers don't believe the brand is making good on those claims. Employees don't understand the brand's mission. I think this is one of those things that is the first sign that you're out of alignment. If you've got people that are working for you and they don't understand what the promise is to the customer, they don't understand what the brand really represents and the why of the brand, then you're very easily going to fall out of alignment because they're not telling the same story that you are. They may be telling a completely different story if they don't understand where you're coming from. So this is one of those points where, brand, having real brand standards is important, and having brand training is important. And, as solopreneurs, we may not have this per se, but sometimes we do. Like if we have a virtual assistant that may not be representing our brand the way that we want them to, or if we're working with another brand that represents us in a very different way than we want to be represented. So yeah, we don't have a lot of employees, but we have to be aware of the fact that VAs and other companies and stuff could be representing our brand in ways that we don't necessarily want. Which leads to inconsistent messages being distributed, businesses perceived as out of touch, and the brand is out of touch and unaware of the competition. Any questions about that?
What do you really think the brand identity is? I know you were saying the brand is who you are and how it's separate from, but when you're saying loss of brand identity, it's beyond a messaging thing and it's beyond a loyalty thing. What do you feel it is?
I think when you lose the brand identity, it's you're gone down that road so far that there's no connection to who you are and where you've been. There's not a real solid connection with your story. There's not a connection with your why. And there's really just something is missing. You don't have what you need to really represent your brand correctly. And I think, that's really far down the road. Hopefully, especially in small businesses, we don't get that far down the road because we're really in control of how we represent our business. We're aware, most of us are aware of those things. And when you're not a large company, because large companies have a hard time managing, how to share their brand with so many people. And that's why having a culture, as opposed to just, these expectations, but having a culture that kind of encompasses all that you believe in a brand is much more effective way than just training everybody.
You talked about differentiators. How often do they really change? Because I'm also very unique in my field, and that might be part of it. Because I don't really see a lot of change there for me at all.
Well,
Ever.
so there's not going to necessarily be somebody who's doing what you're doing in the same way. I mean, as we grow, we're going to have to look at the way that, like I could say that my differentiator right now is I focus on stories on social media, but there is a very big flux of people that are starting to talk about stories and how how people should tell their story on social media. That may not be a differentiator for me very long. I might have to, in that establish a different differentiator or just get better at it than everybody else, whatever it is. But there is definitely, as the market changes, there's a need to kind of focus on your differentiators and say, is this really something that's different, or are people doing it?
I think the thing that's challenging, and I really want to thank you last week from the sharing of a spotlight. A friend was going through old videos, and they've been recording videos of me probably since I started coaching. So they probably have about 7 or 8 years worth of videos. And they said, they're cleaning up their hard drive. And they said, I look at your presentation last week and it doesn't seem like the same brand. I think that's why I really wanted to check with you about the brand identity, because to me, I was always in event marketing. It was just live events before, and adding virtual events has a very different feel for some people who were afraid of virtual, or they haven't necessarily tried it. It sounded, the person said to me, it feels, or my brand story is making it look like it's a different brand to them. I don't know if that's their perception. I appreciate they still have the loyalty, but they're mentioning, as I'm using more stories, that it's got a different feel to it. So thanks for explaining the identity part, but I understand what Rich feels like. We feel like in marketing, we're in a pretty narrow niche, but I think the people outside who engage with our services they're looking at it in a very different viewpoint than we look at it,
Yeah, and we have to remember with branding, we don't set our brand, it's everybody else that does. So their perception could be the reality of what your brand is. So you have to be aware of that and make sure that you take that into account as well. But there's nothing wrong with adapting as a brand and change. I'm not saying that change is bad in this situation. I'm saying that not accounting for the change is bad. Change is good, and you're going to need to evolve and grow and expand, but you need to account for that in your brand story, and what you're putting out there as what you want to be perceived as. So what other issues do you think could arise from being out of alignment with your brand? I think we kind of talked a little bit about it.
To lose a large client.
You could, and that's one of those things that, because if you're perceived as being out of alignment, if you're perceived as kind of flailing about, trying to grasp onto straws, that doesn't really make people feel confident in you. Your messaging may not be consistent, and when your messaging starts to be inconsistent, that's a sign that maybe something's wrong here. So you could lose a big client, you could lose, and it may be the best thing that happens to you. You may just say, you know what, I needed that restart. And a lot of small businesses need that restart. But it's scary when you lose that big client.
Also, being out of touch with your competition could put you way behind.
You never want to be chasing. So,
no.
Or somebody shoveling.
What did they say? Unless you're the lead dog, the view never changes.
Yep. So, and this particular quote, the story you weave across channels must reinforce your brand promise if you expect to compel your audience to act. You want them to buy, you have to make sure you're reinforcing your brand promise. And what is that brand promise that makes the difference for them? So, obviously, if we don't want to be out of alignment, we need to maintain our alignment regularly. And it's not a one-off event. You can't expect to roll out your brand and be like, hey, this is my brand and it's perfect and it's going to stay aligned forever. Because nothing is stationary. Nothing just stands there. It has to move. It has to react to the things around it. So you have to be able to really adapt as necessary and realign. Small shifts in the market should be accounted for. Any small changes in your business, just adjust regularly so that you're really paying attention. That's why revisiting this every year is important, because it'll allow you to catch the small things before they become huge, big problems. So the market changes, your competition changes, and you change. So regularly measuring, revisiting, updating, and reinforcing your brand helps you stay ahead of the curve. You're constantly writing the story of your brand. You're going to grow, you're going to evolve, you're offering new services, you're offering new events, and you're serving new markets. So you're writing your story, and that's great. You should be actively writing your story. Just make sure you're updating your brand story as well with new victories and also struggles. Don't forget about the struggles, because as hard as it is sometimes to put them into our brand, it's very important to put them into our brand. It's important to be human. And all these occurrences keep your brand authentic. My favorite. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And when you really look at it, your why is what connects with people. Your why is that emotional connector. So make sure that when you're aligning your brand, you make sure that you're aligning it with your why. Make sure every member of your team is aware and identifies with your why. That's going to help you make sure your brand maintains alignment. Brand guidelines. And I don't know, I've gotten some brand guidelines from businesses that are great. I've gotten other brand guidelines from businesses that are, I use purple and orange and that's all I got. Like, you know, there has to be, I don't expect a small business to have a brand guideline book that's 50 pages long. But anything that you touch on regularly, you should have an idea how you want to interact with that and how you want your brand to look. So putting that down in writing is not going to hurt you, because it keeps consistency, shows that you're telling the same story, shows that you know what you're doing, and it really kind of reinforces some professionalism in your brand. Make sure everybody representing your brand understands core values, vision, promise to the customers. Use metrics to measure the success of your brand and conduct regular brand reviews. Any questions before I go into the regular brand review? No?
No.
Okay. Nothing? The purpose of your brand is to represent your purpose. How's that for circular talk? But it's true. You're like,
It does go to, yeah.
hey. So brand guidelines in this part of your brand review. You should have brand guidelines, a single document that can be provided to employees and partners alike. Well-defined guidelines that with precise instructions on how your brand should be represented in all mediums. Okay, so I'm being a little dramatic here, but brand guidelines should include things such as logo, colors, fonts, voice, brand, architecture, layout, photography, and story. Brand guidelines are a manual for consistency, and they let you solidify your brand differentiation, your personality, your visual identity, and give your customers a uniform entity in which to identify. When you have a uniform, here's what I would say, and I was telling Robin this the other day. I cannot wait till I get to a point where people say, this is, oh, this looks like something Robin put out. Oh, this looks like something Robin put out. That is where you want to be with your consistency. You know, people recognize my work because they expect it to be a certain thing. And that's great because it's consistency. But every brand should really have that. Brand guidelines must make it clear what promises are being made to the customer and how the brand fulfills on that promise. Clearly articulated and universally agreed upon brand guidelines are your roadmap to alignment. What else should be included in your brand guidelines? I covered a lot in there, but any ideas of other things? Because I could have forgotten something.
I think a brand, a philosophy. It took me years of being in business to come up with a mission.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having conversations with Marcia about what the brand philosophy was kind of led to that. One day, you know, just like stream of consciousness, I just kept writing and writing and writing. And I think the philosophy probably led me towards what you're really saying we should do as a brand review. It brought up some words that I maybe hadn't used in core messages.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of who I wanted to serve or work with. And I think the philosophy really helps tell people who we love working with. You know, I could say I work with entrepreneurs and teams, and I've now added talented entrepreneurs and dynamic teams, but people who love to help others. And somebody asked me yesterday, oh, what problems do you like to solve? I said, clients in a bunch of industry, they're the ones who tell me the problems they want to solve. And that's how we work on it. But I think the philosophy part really pushed underneath, and it's hard to explain it. I'm getting better at explaining it in story,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a hard thing to maybe think about. But I think it helped me align your alignment word. It helped me get to the alignment.
Right.
And that's hard, especially if you're rebranding.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that I left out here actually, as I'm looking over this, is your ideal client. And having that in your brand guidelines will help, because you can then really focus on how your marketing will target that ideal client. And I don't remember who it was. I was following some stuff online, and they literally had it down to the person. And they had a story written about that person that they provided to their marketing team. And it was phenomenal, because it had really identified to the T, like who that person was, where they lived, what they believed in, their past life, their experiences. And so you go, okay, that's one person. They've really narrowed it down to one person. But a whole group of people could identify with some aspects of that one person that really allowed them to create marketing that actually targeted a good chunk of a niche. So, and it was very, very well done. I don't know who had done it, but it was very well done.
Yeah, high-end websites do a lot of that. They do a bio on a person, and they rate for that person. That is their user.
Yep. So brand review help you recognize strengths, weaknesses, create opportunities for improvement, and find new ways to help the business stay relevant and move forward. So our world is changing every day. Audience is changing with it. Keep your eyes and ears open, and that'll help you really identify when it's time to take action, where you need to, and how you need to stand out in the crowd. The ultimate goal for a business is to stay on and stay relevant. And the brand review really helps them do that. So let's jump into the brand review. So step one, take a look at you and the organization. Get a clean copy of this. Look at the questions that I ask about you. Where are you sitting? And look at your audience. Is your audience still the same? Are you reflecting your guidelines throughout your brand messaging? Do changes that may have happened impact the promise you've made to your customer? What do these changes mean to your brand? How can you realign your brand to reflect these changes? And these can be minor changes, and that's okay. You can realign, readjust, rework as you do this. But your first step should really be looking at you and your organization. Next step would be take a look at your marketing, because your marketing should represent you and your organization. And a lot of times there's a disconnect here. you have an idea of what you are and your organization is, and then you look at the marketing, and you have to look at it very in an objective way and really say, okay, where were we at this time? What were we doing? And why doesn't this maybe represent us? But you can take lessons from that and move forward to really make sure that it does in the future. But another place is social media content. And this is like the only time we're talking about social media content here. But it's very easy to get off target with your social media content. It's very easy because you're putting stuff up every day and you may not be following a campaign because you may be recycling some content that's old, or you might be trying to put some new content out there that doesn't quite feel the same as the rest. But then if you go off on a tangent that follows one of those arcs that you've told, you may separate yourself in your marketing from where you really are as a brand. So just being aware of that and seeing where that happens is important to kind of know. And when you do the brand review, so you can fix, adjust, align, or just make sure you don't make that mistake again next time. So, random people walking in your house there. Oh. Next, ask your audience. It's creepy. Ask your audience, what does your audience think? And you know what? You can do it in a lot of different ways. Try polling your audience on Instagram. You've got a solid audience on Instagram, poll them, see what they say. What do they think your brand promise is? Or you could really do a good old-fashioned, what do they call them? Damn it.
Focus group?
Focus group, thank you. Good old-fashioned focus group. Get them together, see what people are saying about you. Ask a friend, ask two friends. What do they perceive? What do they see as your brand? What is your brand promise? What is your brand story? If you ask your audience, you'd be surprised at what information you'll get. Review the changes and realign. So you've gone through this, you've made some changes, review them. See what changes have been good, where you're off that's a little bit, you don't want to do that again. Realign your branding and your brand so that it matches your business. In some cases, you may need to do a complete rebrand. In that case, you're going to want to dive deep and look at where you want to be in the future, what changes you're making now that makes sense for that future, where you could leave some things off that you may not want to be doing in the future. But really kind of, if you're doing a solid, complete rebrand, that's, a 6-month chunk of time. I know. Mel would probably do it in a month and a half.
Actually, no, it took me 18 months.
Yeah.
I went back to something from 2008 when I did it. And it's interesting because it's now coming up in the new page. So, I think sometimes, as you say, repurposing content and finding people still feel it's relevant is sometimes a surprise to us. You can add or try to add bells and whistles, and somebody's into, a plain piece of bread and butter as opposed to pumpernickel or marble, or rye with seeds. They're telling you, just give it to me straight. And I think,
right.
But no, actually, Mel now is faster at it because of how hard it was that first time. Yeah. And I went 6 months without a business card. And yeah, it was hard. I didn't know what to say on it. It was really hard.
See, I'm amazed at I'm surprised my dogs haven't barked. I'm amazed at how quickly some people can do it. And I understand that in some people's minds, it's been in their minds for a long time. They've seen the things that are not quite right. They know where they should be doing some work. And then as they roll it out, it seems to happen quickly when it really has been a long time in the making. But, if you're doing a rebrand, take your time. Make sure you really figure out where you are and where you want to be so that you're not doing a rebrand again in 12 months. Because it's hard work. It's a big investment. So
I also think it helps when you're taking notes kind of about your wish list for your brand. You know, you at times, you're learning parts of your brand story from people who are around you, who are letting you know what it sounded like to them. Like, you know,
Right.
Gerson saying to me about the videos, for example, the other day, you know, I never looked at it like that. And I appreciate it. I was about to record a bunch of videos, and it really made me slow down and say, you know what? He's noticing an evolution, and wondering whether somebody else felt the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you also can't let people noticing an evolution hold you back, because an evolution isn't a bad thing.
You'll be proud of me. I'm just outlining the stories.
I love stories. So then once you've done this, make sure that you solidify your brand standards. Give yourself a guide to live by, so that you don't have to do as much adjusting and aligning as you go forward if you have a large organization, or even just to keep yourself on track. Because I know there are times that I go through trends of like, ooh, I like this font. Ooh, this font represents my, you know, and just remind yourself that there has to be some consistency. And then re-educate all members of your organization, whether they're actual members of your organization or if they're just people that you work with. Because, you know, Rich and I work together sometimes, and I could maybe be misrepresenting Rich in some ways that he might not like, or, you know, might want to hit me over the head with something. We don't want that. We want me to be on the same page as him, so his brand is represented the way he wants his brand represented. So, your brand is really your connection with your audience, and your audience deserves the best. So every day, try to give them the best that you can. It's not easy, but you know, when you're really putting your brand out there, think about how your audience is interacting with it, and if you're giving them the best Mel, Rich, Jonathan you can give them. So that's how I'll end that, and I'll end in 35 minutes. Look at that.
Look at that.
You guys have any questions or anything about branding, brand alignment, brand review, general stuff? So I got time.
I like that step 3 part. It really relates to that marketing challenge that I'm working on now.
Mm-hmm.
What I think what maybe is a shift for me is when you're asking an audience who doesn't know you yet, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and
so it's saying that my ideal client was entrepreneurs and dynamic teams, for example. As I meet entrepreneurs who really care about helping other people, and you ask them the same questions, you may get very different answers than the person who's currently a client, or who's a prospect, or a returning client.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge too is, if you're trying to reach your audience and they're not responsive at the time, and all of a sudden, like 3 months, 6 months later, they're back and you have their full attention, it's like, how do you approach the conversation the same time? You might have moved on from the question,
mm-hmm.
and they're giving you different feedback. So I think that ask part is a place where we all need help.
Yeah, and I think part of it is asking consistently how people want to engage with your brand, asking consistently how people see your brand in the marketplace. You know, there's no harm in asking questions to your audience regularly, and you can do that in even your captions, in the images that you put out there, in just and you don't necessarily have to ask your audience directly. You can ask your audience through A/B testing. You know, and I do this all the time. I'm like, okay, this picture with this caption, this picture with this caption, which does better? Which do they like? Which are they connecting with? And when you look at your metrics there, you're asking your audience and they're providing you feedback, just not directly.
Can you help me with that caption question thing and figure out an A/B testing system for that? I'd love some help.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, I have that, the rule of 3 for social media, which is based on a very general merchandise concept. And the rule of 3 for general merchandise is the body, the color, the design. You change one of them so that you have some scientific proof that the other two kind of are staying the same. So you change the color, but you keep the body and the design the same. So in social media, you look at the piece of content, whether it's a video or a photo, whatever, the caption, and your theme. So like I said, we kind of want to break down what your content is into themes. So if one of my themes is the dogs, and so I have that, the theme is the dog, the content is a video of the dogs, and the caption is a funny caption. So I would test that with a video of the dogs with a serious caption and see which one does better. That's a very simple kind of idea, but you see which one does better. And you go, okay, whoa, funny caption's doing a lot better with the dogs, not doing the serious caption anymore with the dogs. See what else we can build on that funny caption. And see then if it works, funny caption, picture, dog. So that's very basic, but then we can do a little bit more. And the captions, obviously, there's more chunks to it, like whether it's a long caption, a short caption, but.
Yeah, you could A/B test to death.
Yes, you could, but it makes a big difference in your.
Yeah, it does.
Let's test.
Yep. Let me see. What is this? Somebody couldn't make the webinar. Well,
Obviously.
Having a lot of fun picking your brains. I'm sorry they're not here, but maybe they'll pick away on the replay.
They might pick away on the replay. So, yeah, you have anything? If you guys have anything else you want me to go over? All these pictures are from Dia, right there in Beacon.
Oh, okay.
Your photos are amazing. I'm having fun with your Max and Ryder photo. Oh my gosh, they're popular.
Oh, people love dogs. Dogs are social media gold.
You should see what's happening on LinkedIn because of them.
Oh goodness, I'll have to go and check.
I may be the only one who can see it on my side from the stats. I don't know if it
Dogs
shows.
invoke a very strong emotion in people.
Huh?
Dogs invoke a very strong emotion in people.
Yep.
One way or the other.
That they do.
And it's one of Jonathan's beautiful photos. But
oh, well, thanks. That was the Puggles when they were babies, I think, that one. All right. Well, I don't have anything else. I went over all my content.
Excellent.
Hell, you guys are, let me,
I feel like I have a very clear homework list now. And I can now add this to my notes that I was typing over the weekend. So I can now type these, but yep, I now have 3 new projects within this. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Everybody loves it when I give them homework.
Yeah. I mean, a week before lunch, you should have, I typed my accountability thread today. I kind of scared myself with the to-do list because I said, wow, I thought I had made a lot of progress, but boy, we just keep lengthening those lists as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, there's always something.
That's why I don't know how the heck I actually launched the class today, although I missed a couple things in my video, but hey, it's out there. And I got
a fabulous job as always, really.
I got 4 people registered, so I'll take it. Now I just got to get their money. No.
I may have another for you. We just have to go for lunch.
All right.
Actually, we should take Rich there for lunch, you know?
Where?
Somebody who I have not seen in 4 years. Her family used to own a local diner. Okay. And there's been a restaurant that I wanted to go to for 5 months. And Friday after the New Year's Eve breakfast, I ended up there not by accident, I guess. We had an amazing meal and reconnected with this lovely woman. I've been wondering where she's been for 4 years.
Okay.
She needs social media help. She needs Etsy help. She needs a lot of interesting help. I cracked up after the New Year's Eve breakfast when you're totally exhausted. I ran into her, and then while during lunch, I skipped a call. It was one of my absolute favorite clients.
Wow.
And then just before Jonathan, I think it might be Jonathan. So Jonathan just bought me lunch. Somebody who I haven't spoken with in 4 months. Now all of a sudden, she's back.
Hey, it works.
It is. It
Good.
meant taking today off was good because I'll need the rest for tomorrow.
Yeah. How'd your one-to-one with Kayla go?
Wow. So, as Rich would say, it's very interesting when you have one-to-ones with two people in a similar industry on the same day. And in the middle, I had a one-to-one with Chef Steph.
Oh, wow.
The coolest thing was that Kayla's really good at articulating Chuck's difference in a easy to grasp way. So Danielle spit hers out, but then Kayla told her story. But the thing I really loved was newer member to season put a fork in remember is that as seasoned members, we have to remember to really be good listeners. And she gave me a chance to really listen to her story as well as Chuck's story as to where Chuck's business was to where it's going. I asked a question about Nest. She's her ability to kind of drill down, and it's I love getting to know young women with that kind of passion, young moms who know their story, the business story, who have dreams about their future and are trying to figure out how to align it all. It's exciting to watch them as they twist and turn and tell you about their education dreams and, you know, aspirations. So really, I want to thank Jonathan for making sure we got together, because boy, and she ended up coming back to All Sport. So yeah, I was camped out there till 12.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was that kind of day. I was, you know, you're sitting there. I really do. I think meeting that number of people at that rapid a pace, I have to do my follow-up almost before I go on. Like, I went to your meeting and I had business cards in my eyeglass case, which is my open them up. And they ended up, you know, from helping my parents, they ended up on my computer. So Thursday I caught up on the computer pile. And then Friday, I followed up like immediately. And then Saturday, it's